Hello and welcome to the Columbia Daily Tribune's Courtside View webcast. This is Tribune sports editor Joe Walljasper alongside Tribune basketball beat writer Steve Walentik. Steve, Missouri, I guess first things first, we'll talk about the Big 12 tournament. Coming off a 1-1 showing in the Big 12 tournament, not really terribly impressive either game. Actually terrible the second game, I think you would say. Maybe the biggest debate about after the game against Texas A&M was some comments Kimmy English made saying that they quit. Just your thoughts on whether that is an accurate view of what you saw on the court and what that says about the team, if so.
I personally, watching the game, didn't think at any point that I saw them give up per se or stop trying. I honestly thought to say that would give them too much credit in a way, because we'd seen this kind of performance before. It was only a week before that in Lincoln, Nebraska, they'd allowed a really mediocre Huskers team to shoot 67% from the field in the second half. And so I think if you didn't watch them all the time, if you weren't paying attention the entire season, you look at how easily David LeBeau got open, how easily B.J. Holmes got open again in the A&M game, and think, well, they're just not out there trying. But the fact of the matter is they've had those kind of defensive breakdowns all year long, and I don't think that it was anything new to the A&M game. I think offensively they didn't play well. I think A&M had a lot to do with that. I thought they guarded significantly better than they did when the teams met in College Station in January. I think Missouri was victimized by the same things, though, that have killed it really all year long, which is just a complete inability to guard with any sort of consistency. And LeBeau got going early, B.J. Holmes got going early, and they were just never in the game. And then the one maybe little glimmer of hope that fans saw right before halftime, when they cut the game to 10, they make mental mistakes. Phil Pressey throws the ball away, and Ricky Kreklow commits really an inexcusable foul 90 feet from the basket, going for an offensive rebound he wasn't going to come up with, to give A&M 2 more points going into the intermission. And those, again, are things that we've seen this team do all year long.
I think people just are still trying to struggle to wrap their minds around how could a team that we think should be good, that was at one point number 9 in the nation, look this bad. It must just be an effort thing. But I've come around to the way of thinking that they're just not a very good team. I mean, they're average at best, and so they do what average teams do, which is lose to good teams and beat bad teams, and I think you saw that at the Big 12 tournament. So, yeah, to me it was indistinguishable from a lot of their losses, and, people are getting more frustrated, and maybe that's why that comment was made, but I didn't necessarily notice effort issues there. Moving on, now we're on to the NCAA Tournament. Missouri gets in. As it turns out, it's a lot closer call than I think most people had anticipated as an 11th seed. First of all, just your thoughts on Missouri getting an 11th seed, if you thought that was fair, and the tournament selection as a whole.
Well, as far as the 11th seed, I don't have any problem with it. In fact, I think it's probably more in line with what I thought should be happening all along when you saw these projections that had them 8 or 9. They really don't have a ton to stand on. I mean, they had a couple of good non-conference wins against Vanderbilt and Old Dominion. Illinois apparently was a good win in the eyes of the committee, at them getting a number 9 seed. But I don't think the Illini have accomplished all that much. And Missouri was mediocre in Big 12 play, finished terribly. I think, really they look like an 11 seed would look in most years. So I didn't have a problem with that. As far as the rest of the committee, I think there's a lot that you kind of scratch your head at, the Illinois thing being one example.
9 seed, yeah.
That's an Illinois team that Missouri beat, that lost to Illinois Chicago, that was 500 in the Big Ten. You look at then some of the teams that got in and versus left out, and UAB and VCU get in, apparently for completely different reasons. UAB gets in essentially, it was suggested maybe because they won the regular season conference title. VCU finished 4th in the Colonial and got in that large because they played well in the conference tournament, it sounded like. I thought Colorado was a team that had a legitimate beef for not getting in. If the committee decides that Kansas State is worthy of a number 5 seed, which it did, then you would think it could find room for a Colorado team that beat it not once, twice, but 3 times, and they're left out. They have some blame in that, and the non-conference schedule they played was really laughable, and they had a couple of terrible losses. The most notable losing to San Francisco on the road, but it was just hard to understand why one team and not the other.
Yeah, on the one hand, you could say, well, when you've got as bad a year as this was for college basketball's bubble teams, and with a 68-team field, if you didn't make it, you probably didn't have much of a gripe, which is true, I suppose. But I just thought either the committee was acting, Gene Smith almost said it himself. He had 10 different people with 10 different ideas. I think they need to go in and set some guidelines here. Okay, here's what we do find important. Because like you said, there was conflicting reasons why these various teams seemed to be getting in, none of which was explained by him whatsoever afterward. He'd only spoken the vaguest of generalities.
I mean, UAB only beat one team in the field, and it was VCU.
Right, so it didn't make a lot of sense, and then it almost seemed like they figured out what teams they wanted in, and then the seedings became almost irrelevant when you're talking about, obviously, with Illinois getting a 9 seed and how all that worked. With all that said, you're better off with an 11 seed than an 8 or 9 seed if you have designs on going very far. So Missouri, I think, ends up fine, but just maybe not the way that we thought it was all going to go down.
Yeah, because for sure, I don't think the difference between a 6 seed and an 8 seed is really something you can differentiate. I mean, there's so much parity, maybe so much mediocrity is the better way to put it, that once you get past the top 3 or 4 seeds, I think you could throw them in a hat and sort them out anyway, and that maybe is what the committee did.
Okay, so Missouri gets Cincinnati. Just your thoughts on whether that's a good, bad matchup for Missouri?
Well, I'm not really sure. I think Cincinnati's a team that claims that it wants to run, or at least people have described it as a team that wants to run. If that's true, then that favors Missouri. Missouri obviously plays better and is more comfortable when it's able to get up and down the floor, play at a good pace. That said, Cincinnati's only averaging 69 points a game, and they're holding teams to under 60, which was the best in the Big East this year. So from that standpoint, you wonder if they really are set on getting up and down the floor, and if it becomes a grinded-out game, I don't think that plays well in Missouri's favor. I think, obviously, the Bearcats are accomplished defensively, and they've got some good wins. Beat Georgetown twice, which is a team that Missouri obviously lost to. Won at Marquette, beat St. John's, beat Louisville, who is maybe of all the Big East teams the one most similar to the Tigers, a team that likes to press. Will use multiple defenses and likes to get up and down the floor. So the Bearcats have shown they are capable of beating a team like Missouri, and I think that said, if you can really throw everyone in a hat from 6 to 12, then I think the Tigers have at least an okay chance to win that game.
And it almost has to be an open court game for Missouri to beat anybody now, I think, because their half-court offense has gotten to the point where, they got nobody in the post to throw it to, because Ricardo Ratliff was kind of falling off the end of the earth here. And so you see early in games where they're pretty patient and pass it around, but that tends to dissipate by about the 10-minute mark, and then it's just kind of chucking up three-pointers, and if they go in, great, and if not, then you've got disaster games where people are talking about quitting.
And they haven't gone in lately.
Right, and they haven't gone in. So I think it's just all predicated on whether they're going to be able to get up and down the court and score in transition. If they were to get by Cincinnati, probably going to be UConn, a team waiting for them that they played 2 years ago. UConn's a team that sort of took captured the nation's attention this last week by winning 5 games in 5 days. You can look at that 2 ways: either they're red hot or they've just worn themselves out completely. If Missouri happens to get by Cincinnati, do you think they're a decent matchup with UConn?
Not necessarily. I mean, I don't. I've had suspicions about Connecticut all year long because they're a team that really depends heavily on one guy, and that's obviously Kemba Walker. They were a 500 team in the Big East, but as you said and as you saw, they're a team that when they're playing well can beat really
They're
literally
talented.
anybody in the country. Missouri had trouble with Kemba Walker when he was a freshman. He's a lot better now. And Missouri has not shown that it does a good job of slowing down the opposing team's top player. I mean, if you go back to Austin Freeman, John Jenkins, different star guards have had big nights against them all year long. Alec Burks. I think Kemba Walker could be in that category for sure. And I don't think you ever want to go into a game where the other team has the best player on the floor, and Connecticut certainly would.
Yeah, in recent weeks, I mean, Missouri had no real luck staying in front of Jacob Pullen. I mean, in the past, we've seen lots of guys have career nights scoring against them, so you would start to think maybe they would have to go zone. I don't know. But, yeah, I don't necessarily think they're going to – I think it might be a moot point the way they're playing now. But, I don't know. I think it would just be a real challenge for them to figure out a way to guard him.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, he's a guy who's able to beat you a lot of different ways. He's a kind of like a Jacob Pullen. He's a volume shooter, but he's able to knock down threes. He's able to put the ball on the floor. He's a strong guard, bigger than Pullen. And I think the thing with him is even if he comes out and misses, 4 or 5 shots to start the game, he's not going to stop shooting, and eventually he's going to take enough that they're going to go in.
All right. Lastly, this is a topic we discussed last week, but we'll discuss it again.
We might be discussing it for a while.
Arkansas does fire John Pelfrey, so immediately Mike Anderson, I think in a lot of people's eyes, becomes their number one target. He was asked about that at the selection show press conference. He gave a slightly less assertive comment than he gave to you a few weeks ago. Have your thoughts changed on that? I think we sort of are both leaning the same way that we don't think he's going to leave, but I mean, what is your thoughts?
Well, I think you at least have to step back and reconsider just because it's actually happening now. It's not in the realm of complete speculation. Pelfrey is no longer the coach. They're going to be coming after somebody, and there's very good reason to think it would be Anderson. There's still a lot of affinity for the Nolan Richardson era down there, and he's obviously the door back to that, at least in a lot of people's minds. I think he'd look hard at it just because he did spend so much time there. He does have so much history there. I still think there's a lot of reasons to take him at his word that he's going to remain at Missouri. He's turned down other jobs before. I know they weren't Arkansas, but they were willing to pay him a decent amount of money, and he said no. He's got a team coming back in place that I know he was disappointed with the way that things have gone right now, but I still think he believes in what this team could be. He at least says so. So I think there's a lot of reasons for him to stay, and as we've also talked about, Missouri is going to have an opportunity to pay him a little bit more money to keep him around.
Yeah, Missouri obviously going to have more money because of the Big 12 contracting, and also some news coming out this week that a new TV contract with Fox that could triple the previous deal with Fox, football contract we're talking about now. So there's going to be more money to play with, and not all of that will go into Mike Anderson's pocket, but I think they can pay him a competitive top 15, top 20 wage. He's a guy that's shown in the past that money is not necessarily the deciding factor. Now, before, he really had no particular connection to Georgia or Oregon. He does to Arkansas, so we'll see. The other interesting thing, you spoke with Nolan Richardson on the phone today, and he said that if Mike Anderson wants to go, it's Mike Anderson's decision. He's not. It's not like Dean Smith calling Roy Williams home. I mean, it's just. I think he could take it or leave it one way or the other.
That certainly was what Nolan sounded like. I think he wouldn't be against Mike Anderson taking the job. I think that there was some speculation that, well, has Nolan really gotten over everything that's happened? Does he really want his guy going back there? I don't think Nolan's coming at it from that vantage point.
It's a whole different administration at Arkansas.
Exactly, and a lot of time has passed as well. That said, I think you're right. It's going to be Mike's decision. It's not going to be Nolan really wants me to come back and he's pushing me.
Okay, well, thanks for tuning in this week. Come back next week when we will either wrap up the season or look forward to a magical second weekend of the NCAA Tournament for the Missouri Tigers.